Hey everyone, welcome back to Celebrate Daily, where we break down what's really going on in the world. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss anything. Today, we're jumping into something huge. China's recent investigation of US semiconductors right before those big Madrid trade talks. As of today, September 15th, 2025, those talks are on day 2. Can you imagine the pressure? U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is going up against Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng, discussing tariffs, tech bans, and even what will happen with TikTok. They have until September 17 to figure things out. And China isn't stopping there. They just hit Nvidia with an anti-monopoly decision, which is clearly aimed at America's AI control. This isn't just about computer chips. It's the newest move in a tech cold war that could make your phone bill higher, screw up how we get products, and change who has the most power on Earth. We're going to break this down in 10 parts, with new information straight from Madrid, including rumors about a TikTok agreement and possible responses. This analysis will be over 3,000 words. Let's start with the background that has Washington, Beijing, and the stock market freaking out. Semiconductors are super important for modern tech. They power everything from smartwatches to military drones and even AI supercomputers. The US has been a leader for a long time, with big companies such as Texas Instruments and Nvidia making analog integrated circuits, ICs. These ICs are like the hidden engines that keep our stuff running. China wants to be a tech superpower, so they've invested a lot in their chip industry, but they've hit snags because of US export rules that stop them from getting the newest tools. On September 13, 2025, China retaliated with 2 investigations. First, they said that US companies were selling cheap analog chips in China, which hurt Chinese companies. Second, they said that US restrictions were intentionally holding back China's tech growth in areas such as AI and advanced chips. Then, on the first day of discussions in Madrid, China made things tougher by accusing Nvidia of breaking anti-monopoly laws. This targeted their graphics card dominance, which is important for AI and data centers. This happened after the US put 23 Chinese companies on a list, saying that they were helping SMIC, such as China's main chip company, avoid bans by buying things secretly. SMIC's effort to create 5nm chips despite the restrictions show how determined China is. These investigations are tactical, as they are timed to put pressure on the US in Madrid, where the discussions included tariffs on lots of goods, rare earth minerals, and important supply chains. Bessent says that China trying to connect TikTok's US ownership with tariff reductions is aggressive, but improvement on technical details suggests a deal might still happen. This comes after previous discussions were held in Geneva, London, and Stockholm. Each time they managed to prevent economic problems with 90-day tariff pauses. With the result of the Madrid meeting not sure, and a Supreme Court ruling on tariffs coming by 2026, we have to ask, is China making a smart move or taking a big risk? Okay, so here's a peek at how companies are dealing with the current political fight. Texas Instruments, a big company in Dallas that makes about $17 billion, produces chips that go into cars, medical tools, and other devices. They depend on China for a lot of their money because Asia is where most of the world's chip demand comes from. On Semiconductor, now on Semi, helps make green tech like electric vehicles more efficient. Analog Devices mixes analog and digital tech for things like sensors and 5G. Broadcom is another company that's been mentioned as being involved. Nvidia is an interesting case. Their GPUs are really important for training AI, but they're facing some problems in China related to anti-monopoly laws. This seems like a response to the US stopping the export of high-end chips to China since 2022 because of military concerns. If China puts taxes on these companies, like 20–50%, or fines Nvidia, these businesses could lose a ton of cash. This could cause their stocks to drop. TI and ON already went down a bit on Friday, and prices worldwide to go up. At the same time, SMIC is helping China fight back, and Huawei is making chips that are getting around the bans. The US is adding more companies to its entity list that help SMIC, saying they could be involved in things like spying or making tech that can be used for both civilian and military purposes. But some people think this is just pushing China to rely on itself more. The Semiconductor Industry Association thinks that the US could lose $1 trillion by 2030 if things escalate, while China has a $47 billion fund that's competing with the US CHIPS Act, which is worth $52 billion. Talks are happening in Madrid, and it looks like the US is against China linking TikTok and tariffs. There's a lot of worry in the market, and some people think the probes are related to bigger instability. TikTok has a deadline of September 17th to change its ownership in the US, or it could be banned, which would affect millions of users. China is asking for some things in return. This whole situation isn't just about companies. It affects jobs, new ideas, and how much your next iPhone will cost. As of September 15th, the Madrid talks are like walking a tightrope. Besant and He Lifeng are trying to avoid setting off problems related to tariffs, tech restrictions, and demands about social media. After the first day, Besant said they made good progress on small stuff. But he criticized China for wanting to drop US tariffs and restrictions on chips as part of the TikTok sale in the US. He sees that as a no-go, since he thinks national security is more important than apps. China's export control list includes TikTok's secret code, so it can't be sold without China's permission. This could mean 170 million Americans lose access to TikTok. But Reuters suggests a deal might be close. They might extend deadlines like Trump did 3 times this year. These talks are the 4th since things paused in Geneva in May. They're based on London and Stockholm agreeing to freeze tariffs for 90 days. Which helped avoid a 0.5% drop in global GDP, according to the World Bank. There's a lot on the table. Tariffs on $300 billion worth of goods, finding safer sources for computer chips, medicine, and rare earth minerals, plus China's investigation into Nvidia, which shows they're not backing down. The US wants EU countries to add 100% tariffs on Chinese goods connected to Russian oil to get around sanctions. China calls this bullying and says it breaks deals made between Trump and Xi NHK, points out investment restrictions, and BBC emphasizes that TikTok is running out of time. Expectations are low, but there might be talk of a Trump-Xi meeting. But China's investigation into discrimination slams US controls as trying to suppress high tech and is thinking about complaining to the WTO. He Lifeng, a supporter of Xi, is all for Made in China 2025. Besant, who understands Wall Street, wants to keep competition under control. Posts on X show what's at stake, with finance folks suggesting these investigations are making the market nervous, as people hope the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates. This isn't just about trade, it's about what the future of global tech looks like. These investigations and discussions have a big financial impact, not just for companies. They could really increase costs and mess up supply chains, kind of like that chip shortage in 2021 that stopped car production and made prices jump way up. If China puts big taxes on US-made chips, companies like TI and ON could lose a lot of money because China buys so many of these chips. The Nvidia investigation could mess with things like AI and cloud computing, which would make everything from electric cars to data centers more expensive. The US sells about $50 billion worth of chips each year, and China buys about 30% of them. If that amount drops by 10-20%, it could really hurt jobs in Silicon Valley and those new chip factories in Ohio. Moving production to places like India or Japan would cost a lot, maybe around $100 billion, but it would make the supply chain more secure in the long run. Making chips uses a lot of water and energy. These tensions might lead to cleaner ways of making chips, but for now, expect gadgets to get more expensive. Also, things like 5G and electric cars could be delayed because China controls a lot of the lithium and magnets needed for them. This whole situation is causing a lot of disagreements. Workers in the US might like the idea of taxes on Chinese goods, but economists are worried it could lead to a big economic downturn like in the 1930s. China's control over rare earth materials could also hurt US defense and renewable energy efforts. Efforts to make peace, like restarting rare earth trade in Stockholm, are really important. Besant is focused on security and doesn't want to trade things like TikTok to make deals. Some people on social media think these investigations are happening because people are hoping the Federal Reserve will lower interest rates. Goldman Sachs thinks this could give the market a boost, but worries about trade are making people cautious. All over the world, companies like ASML in Europe are feeling the effects. India is building more chip factories, and Africa is selling rare earth materials to different countries. But there's a risk of a splinter net, where technology is split up, which could cost the world a lot of money. When it comes to the military, chips are super important. They are key to things like F-35 fighter jets, AI drones, and even quantum computers that can break codes super fast. The US is trying to keep Chinese chips out of important stuff because they worry about spying. China says this is just the US trying to hold them back in AI and military tech. Semiconductor's progress with 5nm chips could lead to some serious weapons. Nvidia's graphics cards could be used for both normal AI stuff and war games, so looking into them is a big deal. What's going on in Madrid suggests they want to reduce risks in things like power grids, where they depend on both the US and China, which makes them nervous. People are banning TikTok because they are worried about the data of 170 million users. Remember when ZTE almost went under in 2018 because of US sanctions but was saved by paying fines? Or when Huawei switched to Harmony OS? These probes could push China to become more self-sufficient. CSIS thinks this could slow down China's AI progress by a few years, but it could also hurt innovation in the US. Taiwan's TSMC makes most of the advanced chips, so it is a sensitive point. The US is moving chip factories to Arizona to protect against a possible invasion. Madrid might change some rules or hold off on tariffs, but China's move with Nvidia shows they are ready to fight back, maybe by using things like fentanyl or messing with currency. Okay, so about what might happen in Madrid. Day 2 is here, and anything could happen. Maybe there will be a TikTok deal or just an extension, or maybe everyone will dig their heels in. Besant says things are moving forward, but he doesn't want to link China's tariffs to TikTok. But if ByteDance doesn't sell TikTok by September 17th, it could get banned. China's making that harder by controlling algorithm exports. Those semiconductor investigations might be put on hold if the US eases up on some restrictions. It is kinda like what Stockholm pulled off with rare earth stuff. The best case is a 90-day tariff freeze talks about chip standards and setting up a Trump-Xi meeting to control how they compete. The worst case? Nothing changes. Duties increase, Nvidia gets fined, and tariffs come back at 60%. Which will hurt growth. He Lifeng isn't moving on. Made in China 2025, and Besant seems to want to make deals. External factors? The Fed might cut rates, which Goldman says would boost the markets, but a Supreme Court ruling on tariffs by 2026 is a big deal. Posts on X show the market is up and down, and news about investigations is linked to stocks going down. This is testing the idea of de-risking, cutting back how much we rely on each other without totally breaking things off. It's super important since both countries are tied together when it comes to electric vehicles and medicine. This global stuff is changing who's friends with who and messing with markets. Like Europe's ASML is getting pushed by the US to sell less to China, which could hurt German car sales if China gets mad. India's Tata Micron factories could make it a chip center, and Africa's rare earth mines are fighting China's control, which helps green stuff but causes environmental arguments. We might see gadget prices go up by 15–20%, and 6G might take longer to arrive. Electric cars could slow down because there's not enough lithium. If the US and China split on tech, it could cost $3.5 trillion in GDP by 2030, splitting the world into a US-led clean network and China's digital Silk Road. But there's good stuff too. US factories in Ohio are creating jobs, and China's chips are giving the West a run for its money. If Madrid does things right, it could help bring everyone together. If not, things will get even more divided, and countries like Japan might stick closer to China. Posts on X are showing worries about trade mixed with hopes for interest rate cuts, which shows how high the stakes are right now. The tension between Trump and Xi is at the heart of this situation. Trump's America First plan is bringing back tariffs, and a lot more Americans see China as a major threat these days. 70% versus 40% back in 2010. At the same time, Xi is pushing for China to depend on itself, especially with so many young people, 15% out of work. Even though Besant likes to make deals and He Lifeng is firm in his beliefs, they still respect each other enough to keep talking. History tells us to be careful. Tariffs made the Depression much worse in the 1930s. Back in 2020, the Phase 1 deal just bought us some time. Maybe Madrid will be where Phase 2 happens. Or maybe things will fall apart. Either way, it's going to change the future of tech. Okay, so China's looking into Nvidia's chips, and things are a bit spicy in Madrid. It shows how tricky the US and China situation is, especially with TikTok in the mix. Is China playing it smart, or is this going to make things worse? What do you think? Let us know. And if you want more updates, give us a like, share, and subscribe. Sources are down below. Keep up with what's happening.